all thought it was crazy. What kind of assignment is that? Who ever heard of taking garbage to school? But that's what our teacher wanted, so that's what we did. Every bit of garbage in our house. And did it smell? Some of us used masks and plastic gloves. That helped a little. Then we just had to dig in. Our first job was to sort the garbage. My dad had already put our grass clippings into trash bags.
Who's got plastic? Plastic.
But I had to separate other kinds of garbage. Paper, waste food, aluminum cans, glass, and plastic. It wasn't pretty, but somebody had to do it. Next, I figured out how much garbage my family produced in a single week. First, I weighed myself. Then I weighed myself again, holding a sack with all my family's newspapers in it. By subtracting my weight, I got 7 kilos of newspapers. I did the same with all throwaway aluminum cans, glass bottles, plastic bottles, and almost 18 kilos of grass and garden junk. Add it all up. That's 44 kilos of garbage in 1 week.
Landfill space. And we're gonna run out of space to put all our garbage.
If my family produces that much garbage in a week, imagine how much comes from all the families in our community. Wow! Imagine how much comes from the whole country. The next morning, we started at the chalkboard.
What was the percentage of composition of the various kinds of garbage that we had?
Dana?
46% paper, 10% for metal, and 12% for glass.
Somebody else with some of the others. Julia?
We got 6% plastic, 8% food waste, and 15% yard waste.
All right, and that leaves us with what for everything else? Tracy?
3%.
3%. Now, what do you think happens to all this trash?
We either burn it, bury it, or recycle it. Recycling is when we take our garbage and turn it into something useful. A lot of our trash goes into incinerators to be burned. Incinerators greatly reduce the volume of trash, but they have problems. Once the garbage is burned, there's leftover ash to be removed. And incineration can create some air pollution. But what if we could use the energy generated by burning and turn it into something useful? At this new waste-to-energy plant, truckloads of garbage go in one end, and electric power comes out the other. The smoke is carefully cleaned of almost all pollutants before it goes out the stack. Another way we handle garbage is called landfill. That means burying garbage in specially prepared places. We put most of our garbage into landfills, but landfills have problems too. The waste buried in them can contaminate the surrounding ground and nearby water supplies. So the sites have to be carefully and regularly checked, even after they're filled. I used to think that biodegradable materials could break down in a landfill, but it doesn't really work that way. Biodegradable, capable of being broken down by the action of bacteria. Layers of trash are buried on top of each other and covered up, without oxygen, light, and moisture, the conditions needed for the bacteria to break down the garbage. Even biodegradables decay very slowly. As a result, landfills just get bigger and bigger. This landfill gets thousands of tons of waste from New York City every day. It's the largest human-made monument in the world, and it's getting bigger every day. What a waste! Already, it's 25 times the volume of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The third way to handle garbage is to recycle it. Recycling, caused to undergo processes or treatment in order to be used again. Old aluminum cans can get turned into new aluminum cans. Old newsprint gets turned into new newsprint. Recycling only takes care of about 13% of our garbage today, but it's got a lot of promise. Look at the problems it solves. Fewer landfills getting bigger and bigger. Less smoke and smog. Instead of wasting everything, recycling puts these materials back to work. But how do you do it? How do you turn a bag of trash into something that's useful? The first thing you have to do is pick the stuff apart. Separate the recyclables from the rest of the garbage. Then, you have to separate the recyclables from each other. That's because different materials need different handling. You can't recycle an aluminum can the same way you recycle a newspaper. In some communities, people separate their recyclables and their trash into different containers before they set them out for collection. Then when the recycling truck comes, the workers separate the materials as they collect them. Some communities don't have separated curbside recycling. What do? Their recyclables are taken to a separation plant. Here, tons of mixed recyclables are sorted every day. Just think about all the space that would be taken up in a landfill. Instead, most of these materials can be used again. First, the materials are loaded onto a conveyor belt that carries them into the plant. The belt travels past a big electromagnet that attracts steel and iron. These things are pulled aside and shipped to steel mills and other plants for reuse. Next, the belt travels through a rolling curtain of metal chains. heavy objects like glass bottles pass right through the chains. On the other side, that collected and separated by hand into piles of different colors, usually green, amber, and clear glass. But lighter objects, aluminum cans and lightweight plastic bottles, can't push through the chains, so they roll off to the side. Next, the aluminum is separated from the plastic by an electric current in a magnetized drum. When aluminum rolls across the drum, magnetic repulsion shoots it off into a separate hopper. The plastic keeps on going to people who sort it into two kinds of material: hard plastic, like soft drink containers, and soft plastic, like milk containers. What about the things that have a lot of different materials in them? You can still sort them for recycling, but it takes real power and ingenuity. This metal goes to a steel mill to be melted down and used again. It could end up as many different things, as a tool, a toaster, or even a toy. In the end, whether recyclables get separated by machinery or by people in their homes, it has to be sorted before the materials in it can be recycled. What happens to the recyclables after they're sorted? Well, that depends on the material. Aluminum recycling is pretty simple. Old cans get turned right back into new cans. First, the cans get flattened into blocks. Then they're loaded into a shredder. It breaks them up into pieces that look like bits of popcorn. These pieces get melted together and cast into ingots of aluminum. Finally, the ingots are pressed into sheets. The sheets are then rolled into coils, ready to be manufactured into new aluminum cans. Recycling aluminum cans costs a lot less than making them from raw materials, and it uses a lot less energy. The process is so efficient that from the time you toss a can into a recycling bin, a new one can be back on the shelf in just 6 weeks. That metal can travel around and around, being reused over and over again, saving money, energy, and resources on every trip. Like aluminum, plastic is made from a limited natural resource: oil. We can conserve oil by recycling plastic products, but it's hard to do. Many plastic bottles have 2 or 3 different kinds of plastic in them. The heavy plastic at the bottom, the transparent part in the middle, and the hard part in the cap. That means that after they're ground up, the different kinds of plastic have to be separated from one another. That's done in a water bath. The lighter pieces float while the heavier pieces sink. After that, the pieces can be made into new plastic that's ready to go right back to work. Just as recycling plastic conserves oil, Recycling paper conserves our forest resources, trees. Trees that help purify our air and give our wildlife a place to live. Rather than throwing paper into a landfill or burning it, we can reuse it. Our teacher showed us how we can make our own recycled paper. We mixed together torn up newspaper, 2 cups of water, and a tablespoon of cornstarch, until we had a goop that was as thick as split pea soup. That's slurry, the pulp that paper's made of. Then we scooped the slurry into a mold. It had a screen on the bottom so that the water could drip out and leave the paper behind.
Is that newspaper or Xeroxed?
We took off the top of the mold and flipped the slurry onto a piece of felt. Carefully lift up the screen and you've got a square of slurry lying on the table. We covered the slurry with another piece of felt and rolled it gently with the rolling pin to get some of the water out.
Don't take Xerox stickers in here. Put this with the Xerox paper.
When it's completely dry, it will be paper again. Paper makers do the same thing that we did in our classroom, only on a bigger scale. They grind up tons of paper at a time. Then the paper pulp is processed to get the ink out. Next, the slurry is spread onto a big rolling screen. Then it's pressed and dried. I never dreamed there were so many ways to recycle things. After all, it's a natural process. Nature does it all the time. When leaves fall in a forest, nobody rakes them up. Instead, they recycle. Over time, with the help from earthworms and bacteria, they decompose, or break down, into a natural fertilizer. Many of the nutrients that they contain return to the soil, where other plants reuse them. You can use nature's way in your own backyard. There's a kind of lawnmower called the mulching mower. Instead of catching the grass in a bag, it chops the clippings into tiny bits. As they decompose, the clippings naturally fertilize the lawn. What about the bigger stuff, like leaves and branches? Instead of throwing them away, you can chop them up and then pile them into a compost heap. Since yard waste is such a big part of our garbage, many communities are recycling it too. Here, workers are turning and sifting fresh compost. It came from everyone's leaves and grass clippings collected in special bags. But what happens to other materials, like metal cans, plastic bottles, glass, and newspaper? Used newsprint can be turned into ceiling tile and insulation that's used to build houses, bedding for animals, and even into kitty litter. Aluminum can be recycled into metal furniture, door closures, and parts for cars. And lots of things are made from recycled plastic, like carpeting, yo-yos, road barricades, storage bins, trays, desk accessories, doormats, paintbrushes, and even flower pots. Once we decide to reuse things, there's no end to the uses we can put them to. It's easy to remember what to do with the 3 R's. That's reduce, reuse, and recycle. Reducing is when we buy and use less. We buy packages that don't waste paper, plastic, or cardboard. We buy larger sizes so we don't have as many containers to throw away. We write on both sides of a sheet of paper. By reducing, we generate less waste and use less of our natural resources. Reusing helps too. We reuse food containers for a lot of things. You get the idea. We shop with reusable shopping bags. This also cuts down on our waste. And we can recycle much of the waste that we do create, reusing our resources over and over again. We just can't keep on throwing it all away. In the art room, we made posters about recycling. We tried to imagine what would happen if all recycling stopped. What would the world be like 100 years from now? It's not a pretty picture. But things don't have to turn out like that. There's another way we can go. If we put a little effort into the problem and use our imagination, we can stop wasting our resources and make our world a better place to live in.